Yesterday, I was hit by a car driven by my mother-in-law and had to go to the hospital. After surgery, while I was resting, my husband called. He said that after I was taken away, the police came by. I told them I was startled by the car and fell, but now they're saying someone saw my mother-in-law hit me with the car. From what my husband excitedly explained, it seems both my in-laws were taken to the police station. It turns out I was indeed injured by my mother-in-law driving the car yesterday. Yet both she and my father-in-law lied in their statements. My husband had planned it all to make it look like I fell and got hurt. I was shocked. Hey, are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain that it was just a fall, he said to me right after I was rushed to the hospital. I was so angry that I decided to get revenge on my husband and in-laws. They must think I'll always do what they want, but that won't happen. Then it hit me. This will surely prove I was hit by my mother-in-law. I picked up my phone again. My name is Emma, and I'm 50 years old. Ever since I got married, I've been a homemaker. I met my husband, Hayen, when I was in my 20s. It was a typical office romance. He was assigned to mentor me when I joined the company. He wasn't particularly attractive or appealing to women, and naturally, I didn't have any romantic feelings for him. I saw him simply as a colleague whom I diligently followed every day. However, while working together, he took a strong interest in me. At first, I thought he was just happy to have a co-worker close to his age, but I gradually realized it was more than that. Despite my initial reluctance, I started to feel good about the daily flattery. Looking back, I don't know what I saw in him, but I fell for his sweet talk, and we began dating. We continued working together for a while, and about a year later, he proposed to me. With no reason to refuse, I accepted, convincing myself that this was what life was about. At my husband's suggestion, I quit my job and, without discussion, moved into his parents' house. I had visited my in-laws a few times before we got married, but I had never imagined living with them. They were warm and welcoming during those visits, which reassured me. By that time, my father-in-law had retired. So, I spent my days with my in-laws while my husband was at work. It wasn't the sweet newlywed life I had imagined. At first, they seemed somewhat considerate, but their attitude towards me changed over time. My mother-in-law's demands grew day by day, crushing my spirit. You're only able to be a homemaker thanks to Hayen, so you better be perfect at housework, she would often say. Whenever something slightly displeased her, she eagerly scolded me. She never doubted her mission to educate her imperfect daughter-in-law, which seemed to be her life's purpose. She had lived with her own mother-in-law, too, and often bored me with stories about how things were in her day. Times and values have changed, and being forced to accept her outdated mindset was nothing but a nuisance. But due to my position, I had no choice but to silently endure her constant nagging. She often went to a cafe with her friends of the same age, where they seemingly enjoyed complaining about their daughters-in-law. Oddly enough, they didn't brag about how great their daughters-in-law were. But rather than bragging about how great their daughters-in-law were, they competed over who had the worst one. Hearing these stories made me wonder if I would end up like them, filling me with dread. As for my father-in-law, he wasn't exactly supportive either. Although he didn't antagonize me like my mother-in-law, he complained about my cooking almost daily. The seasoning is too strong today. Are you trying to get rid of the elderly quickly? His old-fashioned attitude, viewing women as inferior, was evident whenever the topic came up. He kept saying how women should be considerate and assist men, or that they should understand things without being told. It's embarrassingly idealistic. I guess some people never change, always acting high and mighty no matter their age. My father-in-law doesn't exactly pick on me. He's more about boasting his beliefs to me, proud of his outdated thinking. He'll probably never realize his mistakes and just keep getting older like this. They're just like those unpleasant in-laws you see in dramas. I've tried discussing it with my husband several times, but it hasn't changed anything. As our marriage has gone on longer, my husband started blaming me. My parents are elderly, you should be kinder to them. Isn't that what a daughter-in-law should do? Like father, like son. following in his parents' footsteps. My husband also began to look down on me and exploit me. He doesn't help with anything when he comes home. He just sits there as if it's the most natural thing. Maybe things would have been different if we had kids, but we never did. I went to the hospital for infertility treatments until my late 30s, but the dream never came true. Right after we got married, my in-laws were always pressuring me about when they would see a grandchild. It's not entirely my fault. Children are a blessing. It's ridiculous to think about having a baby just for my in-laws. I figured there was no need to force it, so I gave up when I turned 40. In this less than happy life, there were people who supported me, the couple who lived across the street, Juliana and Kyle. They lived together without any children. Kyle's mother had lived with her mother-in-law and didn't want to cause the same trouble, so he refused to live together with his mother-in-law. Juliana was there for me during my infertility struggles and even listened to my complaints about my in-laws. My in-laws and husband are all about appearances, so Juliana was initially surprised. I thought your husband was a nice guy. It's a bit off-putting that he's still not independent from his parents at his age. Thanks to Juliana, I managed to get through life without getting too overwhelmed. My mother-in-law, over 75, still drives herself when going out. It looks dangerous, and I've warned my husband that he doesn't listen. If I suggest she should give up her driver's license, he explodes. Are you calling my mom an idiot? He gets furious, thinking I'm insulting his mother. I tried talking to my mother-in-law too, but she still thinks she's young. Are you treating me like an old lady? You're really unpleasant, she says, getting as angry as my husband. I was worried something terrible might happen, and it did, but not in the way I expected. That day, as usual, I walked to the nearby supermarket without a driver's license. Walking is mostly how I get around. I had thought about getting a license after starting a job, but I got married sooner than expected. When I discussed it with my husband, he was against it, saying, "You can drive, so you don't need it." On sale days, I end up with too much to carry, but there's no way I can ask my husband or mother-in-law for a ride. My husband, who used to happily offer a ride when we were younger, now just scoffs and refuses. I was carrying heavy bags and had just gotten back home when I noticed the garage door was open. Did she say she was going out today? My mother-in-law hadn't mentioned anything when I left the house. Well, never mind, I thought, passing the garage to head to the front door. Suddenly, a car roared out of the garage at high speed. "Oh," was the only silly thing I could utter in surprise. The next moment, the car hit me without slowing down. It threw me backward by the impact, and groceries tumbled from my bags. In that position, my body slammed into the asphalt. Dazed and not understanding what happened, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head from the impact. I couldn't get up. All I could do was lie there, looking up at the sky. How long had passed when I realized Juliana was looking down at me? "Hang in there, I've called an ambulance. Everything's going to be okay." Juliana's face, speaking to me, was pale and strained. I wondered if things had gotten that serious. A naive question crossed my mind. As I moved my aching head slightly, I could see blood flowing from it. Seeing this, I began to understand the gravity of my situation. I started to realize the seriousness of what had happened, but there was nothing I could do. I was unable to move. Soon, I could hear the ambulance siren getting closer. "Just a little longer, they're almost here. Hang on," Juliana desperately encouraged me. My head started to feel fuzzy. No, just a little longer, I thought, despite her words. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was lying on a hospital bed, with a tube and IV connected to my hand, and I could see fluid dripping continuously. Realizing I was saved, tears naturally flowed. Moving my head slightly brought sharp pain. It was no wonder, given the bleeding. As I groaned in bed, a nurse rushed over. "You shouldn't move your head yet." I had many questions but listened silently to the nurse's explanation. It had been 1 day since the accident. I was rushed to the hospital by the emergency team called by Juliana. After arriving, I underwent surgery to stitch up my head and survived, Juliana had stayed with me the whole time, and now she had returned home as it was past visiting hours. It seemed she had contacted my husband, Hayne, too. But after telling him the surgery was successful, he didn't say anything else. My whole body was in pain, but there was no life-threatening injury. I just needed to rest for a while. However, with so many things to think about, I just closed my eyes. Soon after, my phone on the bedside table started ringing insistently. I didn't want to answer, but the calls persisted. After several repeats, it seemed there was no sign of giving up. I found my phone without moving my head and saw Hayne on the screen. Thinking he must be worried, I answered with a slight relief. Hey, actually, my parents. Hayne started speaking without giving me a chance to talk. After you were taken away yesterday, the police came. I told them you were startled by the car and fell, but now they're saying someone saw Mom run you over. Summarizing my husband's frantic story, it seems both of my in-laws have been taken to the police station. Indeed, I was injured by a car driven by my mother-in-law, yet she and my father-in-law, who was in the passenger seat, had lied. Even Hayne had instructed them to agree that I had fallen and got hurt. I was dumbfounded for a while. Fortunately, the car wasn't damaged. Dad wasn't hurt. Mom seemed to have twisted her neck from the collision. Despite that, poor them. The police are being so one-sided, he said, more concerned about the car and his parents, oblivious to my shock. How rotten can this family be? Since picking up the phone, had he said even one word of concern for me? No, nothing. He was only worried about his parents being taken to the police and even wanted me to prove their innocence. Hey, are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain it was just a fall. The automated message interrupted his one-sided conversation, but he was surprised by my first response. I cut off the call. Calls from Hayne continued for a while, but I, infuriated, set my phone to reject his calls. I later learned that my in-laws had indeed been taken to the police station, just as my husband had said on the phone. Sometime later, my husband Hayne was also taken to the police station where my in-laws were waiting. It was Juliana, our neighbor, who had seen everything unfold. She was the one who had originally called the police about my mother-in-law's crime. After accompanying me in the ambulance, she handled various procedures in place of Hayne. She was questioned by the police officers who arrived at the scene. It seems her questioning happened after they had already spoken to my in-laws, serving as a sort of corroboration of the story. Juliana noticed the accident when she heard a loud noise outside. Looking out her window, she saw me lying on the street and hurriedly called an ambulance before rushing out. By that time, my mother-in-law's car was gone, and it wasn't clear what had happened. Juliana was more concerned about my safety than finding the cause. When questioned, she told the truth. However, my in-laws immediately denied any suggestion by the police that I had been hit by a car. Sensing something was off, Juliana kept thinking, even after the police officer left. After ensuring my surgery was complete, she returned home and discussed the incident with her husband, Kyle. Then, Kyle came up with an unexpected solution: the car's dash cam. It records 24/7. The accident happened right in front of our car. It must have caught everything. They checked the camera in their car together. Just as I thought, true to Kyle's hunch, the moment of my accident was recorded. The footage unmistakably showed my mother-in-law hitting me with her car after I fell. My father-in-law even peeked out of the car window. Before they drove away, it was a clear hit and run. Armed with the footage of my in-laws' crime, Juliana and Kyle went to the police station. They were able to prove that I hadn't simply fallen and injured myself. Despite the video evidence, my in-laws were reluctant to admit their guilt. That video is a setup. Someone is trying to frame me, officer. Please, you can't put an old lady like me in jail, right? Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law were embarrassingly adamant in denying the crime. Eventually, my mother-in-law admitted guilt, claiming she was instructed to hide the truth by her son. Indeed, Hayne had told his parents to align their stories, but I questioned my mother-in-law's sanity for betraying her own son to save herself. My father-in-law, perhaps tired from the interrogation, admitted that he was in the passenger seat but had fled without helping me. When the police interrogated Hayen, he also struggled to admit his involvement. Then, a detective came to my hospital room. Your parents both say they were instructed by their son to cover up the accident. At first, they lied through their teeth, but this seems to be the truth, the detective explained, showing evident regret. They inspected the car but found no major damage. If Hayen had repaired any damage to the car, it would have been considered evidence tampering. However, Hayen wisely decided against it. Since then, I haven't seen Hayen at all and have lost all affection for him. I told the detective about the phone call. The detective sighed deeply after hearing this. I don't know what to say. I can only imagine how you feel. He sympathized with me, someone who had been betrayed by her family after suffering a serious injury requiring surgery. After a while of heavy silence, the detective bowed deeply and left the room. A few days later, when I was about to be discharged from the hospital, the police contacted me again. Juliana, who had come to pick me up in place of Hayen, drove me straight to the station. The detective from the previous day greeted us. It turned out he was the same one who had heard Juliana's story, and he led us inside. In the room, we were met with the gaunt figures of Hayen and my in-laws. Emma, my mother-in-law, upon seeing me enter the room guided by the detective, suddenly began to tear up. I thought it was insincere, but she seemed genuinely crying. Whether she felt relieved to see a family member or was relieved to see me alive, hoping for a lighter sentence, I couldn't tell. We waited for my mother-in-law to calm down before beginning. A female officer soothed her, and she finally seemed ready to talk. My father-in-law, sitting next to her, looked utterly exhausted and kept repeating "I'm sorry" to me. The specific purpose of the day was to align the details of the accident with me, the victim present. The screen displayed the footage of the accident submitted by Juliana. While watching it, the detective proceeded to discuss each detail. My in-laws answered the questions honestly, and I nodded in agreement, confirming the facts. The main issue was whether my husband Hayen was involved. Following my statement, his call history had been checked, which proved he had called me. However, even now, Hayen continued to deny any involvement. Unfortunately, I hadn't recorded the content of our call, so the conversation wasn't progressing. Are you trying to frame me too, you liar? At times, the detective calmed Hayen, who became emotional and appeared agitated. Please stop lying. Any further will only lead to your regret. Do you want to betray your own mother and father to save yourself? My warnings fell on deaf ears. Feeling an impasse, the detective spoke up. So your parents are continuing to lie to the police, is that correct? With that question, Hayen fell silent. My words carried a different weight. Your mother running over your wife is clearly captured on the video, which both of your parents have admitted to. But according to you, your parents, out of self-preservation, are implicating you as an accomplice. The detective's serious tone made Hayen's face tense. Do you understand the crimes of your parents are becoming even more serious? Hearing this, Hayen finally admitted his guilt. At the very end, he realized the gravity of his actions. With Hayen's confession, all three were fully exposed. Police officers in the room started moving around hurriedly. Regarding this matter, the detective then turned to me, discussing whether I wanted to withdraw the complaint. While the crimes committed by the three couldn't be erased, this decision would significantly alter their fate. However, I firmly declined. I was lucky to survive. Their decision to flee the scene right after the accident is unforgivable. I'll be filing a complaint to ensure they pay for their crimes. My decision caused a significant stir among them. My mother-in-law cried out loud, and both my father-in-law and Hayen slumped in despair. They probably never imagined I would make such a ruthless decision. They all believed themselves to be good spouses, a good mother-in-law, and a good father-in-law, assuming I would naturally forgive them. Had they handled the situation properly after the accident, it wouldn't have come to this. But my in-laws chose to protect themselves over my life. Hyen prioritized his parents and public image over his wife's life. I want them to reflect on the gravity of their actions and duly pay for their crimes. I stood up silently and left the room, accompanied by Juliana. I started the paperwork in a separate room. Living with my in-laws and Hyen for years, it would be a lie if I said that it doesn't hurt my heart. Above all, I was the one most hurt. Even if my physical injuries heal, this trauma will follow me for life. Despite not having done anything wrong, I felt far from relieved. By the time we left the police station, it was already dark. Juliana, thoughtful as always, invited me to a celebratory dinner for my discharge. I gratefully accepted her invitation and headed to Juliana's home. Warmly welcomed by Juliana and Kyle, we enjoyed a meal together for the first time in a long while. I laughed. They treated me as usual with care and kindness. Even though my in-laws and Hyen were no longer in my life, I was now on my own with legal proceedings and other tasks ahead. It felt overwhelming. At that moment, I chose to forget all that and genuinely enjoyed myself. The morning after that pleasant night, I decided to divorce Hyen. There was no need to keep tormenting myself. Hyen seemed a bit chastened by the whole ordeal, but I realized I couldn't love him anymore. I immediately contacted a lawyer and brought up the subject of divorce with Hyen. At first, he seemed surprised, but soon he agreed, seemingly understanding the situation. I couldn't bear to see Hyen's pathetic state any longer, so I left everything else to my lawyer. The three of them faced criminal charges, and in addition, they were ordered to pay me a settlement. Since the divorce was largely Hyen's fault, I received a significant amount in alimony. I decided to leave my in-laws' house and rented an apartment with the money I received. I had planned to start anew in a distant place, but I chose to stay in the familiar town. There was a reason I didn't move away. Juliana's husband, Kyle, owned a company. He invited me to help out at his company. Juliana was also helping there, and I thought it would be nice to work together. I had been invited before but always declined, fearing what my in-laws or Hyen might say. Honestly, with the alimony I received, I didn't need to work anymore, but Juliana and Kyle were concerned about me suddenly being alone. They gave me a sense of purpose. Having spent decades as a housewife, working with friends was very enjoyable. There were many new things that confused me, but it became a significant part of my life. And so, with this new life, an unexpected encounter awaited me. I met a man through work and decided to remarry. I had told him about my divorce, but kept quiet about the alimony until we got married. He didn't blame me for it. "It's natural to be cautious after what you've been through," he said with a smile. My life changed drastically in my middle years, perhaps more fulfilling and happier than my younger years. I was betrayed and hurt by someone I trusted for many years, but I found greater happiness that surpassed it. Grateful to the friends who always reached out to me, I began walking towards a brighter future.